Beauty, when shaped by Chip Foose, is never loud. It is measured, balanced, and quietly unforgettable. These cars are not built to shout for attention, but to earn it with proportion, patience, and soul. If that kind of craftsmanship still speaks to you, consider subscribing to American Muscle Soul, and take this journey with us through timeless design and memory. The 1965 Chevy Impala Imposter stands as one of the purest expressions of Chip Foose's philosophy that beauty is born from restraint, not excess. Built as a one-off custom and unveiled after years of quiet, obsessive craftsmanship, this car was never meant to follow history. It was meant to question it. At its heart, the Imposter asks a simple, what if? What if Chevrolet's design studio in the mid-1960s had been free to ignore budgets, tooling limits, and production deadlines? The answer is a body that feels familiar at first glance, yet impossible the longer you look. Every panel was reshaped, every proportion reconsidered, until the car sat lower, wider, and calmer than any factory Impala ever dared to be. Power comes from a large displacement V8, built for smooth authority rather than shock value. The chassis is fully custom, paired with modern suspension geometry and high-performance brakes that allow the car to move with confidence instead of drama. This is not a drag strip machine chasing quarter-mile times. It is a grand touring statement designed to feel composed at speed and effortless on long roads. Design is where the Imposter earns its name. Corvette-inspired surfaces flow across the body without imitation. The stance is deliberate, the lines are quiet, nothing shouts, everything belongs. Inside, the same discipline continues, where craftsmanship replaces nostalgia and precision replaces ornament. In 2015, the Imposter earned the Riddler Award, not because it was radical, but because it was resolved. If craftsmanship like this still matters to you, consider subscribing to American Muscle Soul. This channel exists for those who believe true beauty does not age. It simply waits to be noticed. The 1970 Plymouth Terracuda is what happens when Chip Foose decides that a muscle car should grow up without losing its edge. Commissioned by Darren Metropolis, this build was never about excess. It was about control, proportion, and a very personal idea of beauty that had to feel right the moment you opened the door. Foose began with the soul of a Barracuda and quietly removed its limits. The factory unibody gave way to a fully custom frame, engineered to let the car breathe and move like a modern grand touring machine. Power comes from a contemporary Hemi V8, delivering strong, effortless torque that builds smoothly instead of arriving with violence. On the road, the Terracuda feels planted, calm, and confident. The kind of car that prefers long, sweeping highways over quarter-mile glory. Design is where the Terracuda truly speaks. The body sits lower and wider, its stance deliberate and mature. A hand-formed steel hood flows over the engine bay as a single, sculpted surface, turning mechanical force into visual calm. The exclusive brown paint was developed specifically for this car, chosen to feel restrained, elegant, and timeless, rather than flashy. Inside, the rear seats are gone, replaced by a two-seat layout trimmed in fine European leather, turning the cabin into a place meant for driving, not spectators. This is not a correction of a Detroit mistake, it is a thoughtful answer to a question muscle cars never had time to ask. If you have ever seen the Terracuda in person, comment 1. If you have only admired it from afar, comment 0, and tell us if this kind of beauty still speaks to you. The 1971 Mustang Mach Foose exists to answer a quiet but ambitious question. What if a classic Mustang could live comfortably in the modern world without ever looking like it was trying too hard? Commissioned by a Japanese collector known simply as Dr. Honda, this car was never meant to feel like a race machine or a showpiece. It was meant to feel like something Ford could have built if time had bent in the right direction. Chip Foose began with the unmistakable presence of a 1971 Mach 1 and carefully reimagined it on the foundation of a modern Mustang GT. Beneath the vintage skin lives contemporary engineering, giving the car a level of balance, refinement, and confidence that the original could never offer. Power comes from a modern V8 that delivers smooth, predictable strength, paired with suspension and braking systems designed for real roads and real speeds. The result is a car that feels stable, composed, and reassuring rather than raw or unruly. Visually, the Mach Foose is an exercise in restraint. The iconic long hood and muscular flanks remain intact, but every surface has been subtly refined. Panel gaps are tighter. Proportions feel calmer. Nothing screams for attention. Instead, the design settles into the eye, revealing its sophistication slowly, mile after mile. It looks less like a custom build, and more like a lost production dream brought back to life. Unveiled at the SEMA show in 2017, the Mach Foose stood out precisely because it refused to be loud. It represented a mature vision of restomod culture, one where nostalgia and modernity coexist without conflict. This is not a Mustang trying to relive its past. It is one that finally learned how to grow old with grace. The 1967 Dodge Charger, built by Chip Foose, represents a moment when restraint became the highest form of confidence. Created during the peak years of the Overhaulin' television show, this Charger was never meant to shock. It was meant to remind people how powerful simplicity could be when guided by a steady hand. Foose approached the Charger with deep respect for its original silhouette. The long fastback roofline remained untouched in spirit, while subtle refinements lowered the stance and tightened every visual line. Nothing feels forced. The car looks exactly as it should have if Detroit had been given one more chance to perfect it. The paint is dark and mature, allowing the shape to speak instead of the color. Under the hood sits a 426 Hemi paired with an automatic transmission and a gear vendor's overdrive system. The focus here is not raw aggression, but usable strength. This Charger was built to cruise with authority, to feel relaxed at speed, and to deliver smooth confidence rather than dramatic numbers. No official performance figures were ever the point, and none were needed. Inside, the cabin balances old and new with care. Supportive sport seats are trimmed to blend naturally with the classic interior layout. Additional gauges are present, but they never dominate the space. Everything feels intentional, functional, and calm. The final assembly and unveiling took place at the 2005 Specialty Equipment Market Association show, turning the build into a live cultural moment. Its influence reached far beyond the show floor, even inspiring a plastic model kit by Revell. When the car crossed the Barrett-Jackson auction block years later, it carried more than value. It carried memory. This Charger proves that true beauty does not come from excess. It comes from knowing when to stop. The Eldorod is where the story of Chip Foose truly begins. Long before television fame or concours trophies, this one-off custom Cadillac marked his first defining design while working under Boyd Coddington at Hot Rods by Boyd. Built from a late 1940s Cadillac Series 62 convertible, the Eldorod was never meant to chase trends. It was meant to establish a voice. Under the hood lives a classic Cadillac V8, tuned not for speed, but for smooth, dignified motion. The car was built to glide, not to sprint. Power delivery is calm and linear, perfectly suited to long boulevard cruising rather than aggressive driving. No performance figures were ever advertised, because performance was never the point. Presence was. Design is where the Eldorod quietly rewrote the rules. The bumpers, grille, windshield, and aluminum hood were completely redesigned. Rear fender skirts were welded seamlessly into the body, eliminating visual clutter and turning the entire car into one continuous sculpture. Every contour feels intentional. Every surface feels hand-shaped. This was smooth custom at its purest, before excess became fashionable. Inside, custom gauges and a billet leather-wrapped steering wheel completed the transformation, blending craftsmanship with restraint. The cabin feels personal, not flashy, as if it were designed for one driver alone. Only a single Eldorod was ever built. It is often remembered as both the beginning of Foose's design journey and one of the final cars associated with Hot Rods by Boyd before the shop closed its doors. If you are still watching at this point, comment the number 5. It lets me know this era of craftsmanship still matters to you. The 1932 Ford Roadster, interpreted through Chip Foose's craftsmanship, reflects a deep respect for the roots of American hot rodding. This car traces its spirit back to the early 1930s, a period when lightweight roadsters became the canvas for individual expression long before hot rodding had a name. Foose approached this platform not as a blank slate, but as a historical artifact that deserved clarity rather than reinvention. Built around the classic proportions of the 1932 Ford, the Roadster carries the unmistakable stance that defined an era. Power comes from a traditional American V8, chosen to echo the mechanical character enthusiasts would expect from a deuce rather than overwhelm it. The engine delivers smooth, linear response, paired with a drivetrain configured for relaxed cruising instead of aggressive performance. This car is about rhythm and feel, not acceleration numbers. The chassis and suspension are carefully updated to modern standards while preserving the original driving personality. Steering is precise, braking is confident, and the Roadster moves with an ease that feels natural rather than engineered. Every mechanical choice supports drivability without disturbing the soul of the car. Visually, Foose's restraint is unmistakable. The body lines are clean and uninterrupted, the stance is low but composed. Chrome and trim are used sparingly, allowing proportion to remain the focus. Nothing competes for attention, and nothing feels decorative for its own sake. Only one example of this, Ford Roadster, exists in this exact form. It stands as a reminder that the most beautiful customs are often the ones that listen closely to history, then speak softly in return. Hemisfear is the moment when Chip Foose stopped redesigning history and started inventing it. Born as a Chrysler-sponsored graduation project at the Art Center College of Design, this car was never intended to fit an existing category. It was an exploration of what an American performance machine could become if freed from tradition, production limits, and nostalgia. The original 1/5 scale model caused an immediate stir when it appeared in Hot Rod magazine in the early 1990s. Its long nose, exposed front wheels, and sculptural body challenged everything Detroit was building at the time. While Chrysler never officially confirmed it, many designers quietly acknowledged that Hemisfear's DNA echoed years later in the Plymouth Prowler. For more than a decade, Hemisfear lived only as an idea. It was not until the mid-2000s that Foose revived the project, using modern digital scanning to translate his student model into a full-size form. The body was recreated in lightweight carbon fiber, wrapped tightly around a race-inspired chassis with fully independent suspension. Power comes from a Hemi V8 displacing 392 cubic inches, chosen not to dominate the design, but to anchor it with unmistakable American character. Only a handful of Hemisfears were ever completed, making each one closer to rolling sculpture than automobile. This is not beauty defined by chrome or nostalgia. It is beauty defined by courage. Hemisfear shows what happens when imagination is allowed to age without compromise, and why Chip Foose was never content with simply refining the past. The 1974 Jaguar E Type appears here not as a restoration, but as a reinterpretation of one of the most beautiful shapes ever committed to metal. This car was born from a modern restomod movement that believes reverence does not require preservation, and that legacy can be honored through evolution rather than imitation. The original E-Type emerged in the early 1960s as a symbol of European elegance, later earning recognition far beyond the automotive world. This particular build takes that cultural weight and deliberately bends it. Over more than 2 years of craftsmanship, the body was subtly reshaped, not to shock, but to smooth. The hood vents are refined and softened. Brass details are formed by hand. The rear tail is stretched just enough to calm the proportions, giving the car a longer, more settled stance. Beneath the skin lives an American heart. Power comes from a Chevrolet V8, displacing 378 cubic inches, producing roughly 525 horsepower. The engine delivers immediate, confident response, transforming the E-Type from a romantic cruiser into a forceful grand touring machine. The focus is not outright speed numbers, but usable performance and reliability, allowing the car to be driven without fear. When this E-Type debuted at the 2019 Specialty Equipment Market Association show, it divided the room. Some saw sacrilege, others saw courage. That tension is exactly what defines this car. It is not a tribute frozen in time. It is a conversation between eras, reminding us that beauty survives not by standing still, but by daring to move forward. The Stallion carries more history in its steel than most cars ever will. Built from a 1934 Ford three-window coupe, this machine represents the moment when Chip Foose proved that a hot rod could be treated with the same discipline and vision as a factory concept car. The story begins decades before Foose ever touched the car. Ron Whiteside bought the abandoned Ford in the mid-1960s for little more than pocket change. It passed through phases of neglect, revival, racing, and storage as life intervened. When Whiteside finally decided the car deserved its final form, he turned to Foose. Already known for redefining American custom design, Foose approached the Stallion with absolute restraint. The body was reimagined, not exaggerated. The roofline flows lower and smoother. The rear tapers with purpose, and every surface feels drawn rather than assembled. Nothing distracts the eye. The proportions do all the talking. Beneath the sculpted skin sits a fully custom chassis, paired with modern suspension and braking systems that give the car real road manners without betraying its vintage soul. When the Stallion debuted at the Detroit Autorama in 2004, it earned Chip Foose his second Riddler Award. Not because it was loud or radical, but because it was resolved. This car stands as proof that true beauty is not rushed, it is earned over time. Impression is the car Chip Foose often points to when asked to define his design philosophy. It began quietly, sketched on a dinner napkin during a conversation with future owner Ken Reister, and approved in a moment of trust that would soon change Foose's career forever. Inspired by the long, low spirit of a 1936 Ford Roadster, Impression shares nothing with the original except intent. Every body panel was shaped from scratch. The chassis was engineered specifically for this form, allowing the car to sit impossibly low while remaining perfectly composed. Nothing on this car was borrowed. Everything was imagined, then executed with discipline. Power comes from a Chevrolet LS1 V8, chosen not for nostalgia but for reliability and refinement. Foose then did something quietly radical. He reshaped the engine's visual language to echo the look of a classic flathead, blending modern engineering with emotional memory. It is performance dressed in familiarity, strength wrapped in elegance. The wheels were designed exclusively for the car. Their proportions matched precisely to the body's flow. The tires were selected for balance and presence, supporting the design rather than competing with it. Inside, the cockpit feels like a concept study brought to life. Clean, focused, and free of distraction. When Impression debuted at the Detroit Autorama, it earned Chip Foose his third Riddler Award. More importantly, it confirmed something deeper. This was not a custom car chasing history. It was a personal statement, one that proved true beauty comes from clarity of vision, not excess of detail. The MarCel Roadster is where Chip Foose steps away from nostalgia and speaks purely in form. Unveiled at the 2022 Specialty Equipment Market Association show, this car was not built to reference Detroit's past. It was built to celebrate the act of shaping metal by hand. Created in collaboration with master metalworker Luc Delay, the MarCel Roadster exists as rolling sculpture. Every curve was formed manually, every surface tuned by eye and feel rather than software. The proportions echo the spirit of classic European barchettas, often compared to the elegance of the Ferrari 250 Testarossa, yet the car never imitates. It translates that sensuality through Foose's distinctly American sense of balance and restraint. Beneath the flowing aluminum skin sits a modern foundation meant to be driven, not admired from behind ropes. Power comes from a General Motors LS3 V8, displacing 376 cubic inches, paired with a 6-speed manual transmission. The engine delivers smooth, confident torque, while the manual gearbox keeps the experience intimate and deliberate. This is not a car chasing speed records. It is a car built for connection between driver, machine, and road. The MarCel Roadster represents a mature chapter in Foose's career. After decades of redefining classics, he chose to create something untethered from brand loyalty or historical obligation. What remains is pure intent, metal shaped with purpose, beauty achieved through patience. Proof that the most beautiful custom cars do not always look backward to be timeless. The 1933 Ford Model 40-station wagon Woodie shows a side of Chip Foose that values patience over reinvention. This car was never meant to be reimagined. It was meant to be understood, respected, and carefully returned to the moment it first rolled into American life, during the early years of the Great Depression. Built on Ford's original Model 40 platform, this Woodie carries the quiet dignity of a family vehicle designed for work, travel, and reliability. Power comes from a flathead V8 displacing 221 cubic inches, producing roughly 75 horsepower. Paired with a 3-speed manual transmission, the engine delivers smooth, unhurried motion. This is not a car that rushes. It moves with intention, rewarding steady hands and long roads. Foose's approach was defined by restraint. The solid front axle, live rear axle, and semi-elliptic leaf springs remain faithful to period engineering. The proportions are untouched. The wheelbase feels balanced because it was never forced to change. Paint finishes follow factory-correct tones, with warm browns and deep black wheels grounding the car visually. Inside, the cabin reflects the same philosophy. Upholstery and materials are chosen for historical accuracy, not modern comfort. Rubber floor mats, period-correct trim, and a simple layout create an atmosphere that feels honest and calm. Even the woodwork carries subtle imperfections that remind you it was shaped by hands, not machines. This Woodie earned the Dearborn Award, and later appeared at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. Not for creativity, but for correctness. It stands as proof that beauty sometimes comes from knowing when not to improve anything at all. The 1956 Ford F-100 pickup shows how Chip Foose can turn a working truck into something quietly elegant without stripping away its honesty. This build begins with one of the most familiar shapes in American truck history, then refines it until every surface feels intentional. Foose treated the F-100 as a design problem, not a nostalgia exercise. The body was carefully smoothed and tightened, with panel gaps corrected and proportions subtly adjusted. The truck sits lower and calmer than stock, giving it a composed stance that feels confident rather than aggressive. A soft metallic silver tone flows across the sheet metal, catching light without demanding attention. Custom wheels anchor the design, sized and shaped to support the body rather than dominate it. Power comes from a modern American V8, chosen for smooth torque and reliability instead of spectacle. The engine delivers relaxed authority, making the truck feel effortless on the road. Suspension and braking systems were upgraded to modern standards, allowing the F-100 to drive as well as it looks. This is a truck built to cruise comfortably, not to haul or race. Inside, the transformation continues with the same restraint. The cabin is fully reworked with premium leather and clean detailing, yet it never forgets its roots. The layout feels balanced and uncluttered, blending comfort with simplicity. This F-100 is admired not because it breaks rules, but because it respects them. It proves that beauty can exist in utility, and that craftsmanship does not need excess to be memorable. The 1967 Chevrolet C100 C28 is Chip Foose turning a long-held personal idea into metal. This truck exists at the intersection of two Chevrolet legends, not to blur their identities, but to let them speak to each other. Foose began with a clean C100 pickup, a platform known for honesty and balance. Then, he introduced the spirit of the Camaro Z28, a name that once defined factory performance in the late 1960s. The goal was never to build a faster truck. It was to build a truck that felt like a Z28 in attitude, proportion, and detail. Under the hood sits a period-correct Chevrolet V8 associated with the original Z28 philosophy, chosen for character rather than spectacle. The chassis, suspension, and braking were refined to deliver predictable, confident road manners. This is a vehicle meant to be driven calmly and deliberately, not pushed for numbers. Design is where the C28 becomes unmistakably Foose. The body remains familiar, yet sharper. Panel alignment is precise. Surfaces are clean. The truck bed is finished with hand-treated wood, carefully aged and sealed, then framed to integrate visually with a Camaro-inspired rear treatment. Inside, the transformation continues. The seats, steering wheel, and instrumentation echo the cockpit of a Z28 without imitation, creating a sense of continuity rather than costume. This truck was documented step by step through Foose's own video series, turning the build into a shared experience. The C28 is not about fusion for attention. It is about respect, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of finishing an idea that waited decades to be built. The 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle, reimagined through Chip Foose's vision, is what happens when raw muscle learns restraint. This is not a car trying to relive the loudest days of Detroit. It is a Chevelle that has grown older, calmer, and more confident in its own skin. Foose approached this icon with respect, not nostalgia. The original shape remains instantly recognizable, but every surface feels cleaner and more intentional. The stance is lower and more composed, giving the car a sense of weight and balance that factory versions only hinted at. Nothing is exaggerated. Nothing feels added for attention. The beauty here comes from proportion and control. Under the hood lives a Chevrolet V8, chosen for smooth authority rather than shock value. Power delivery is steady and predictable, matched to modern suspension and braking systems that allow the car to move with confidence on real roads. This Chevelle is not about quarter-mile glory. It is about the feeling of effortlessness at speed, the sense that the car is always settled beneath you. Inside, the cabin continues the same philosophy. Materials are refined, layouts are clean, and every detail feels purposeful. It is a place designed for driving, not for display. This Chevelle exists as a reminder that muscle cars do not need to be louder to remain relevant. They need to be understood. If you are still watching at this point, comment below so I know this kind of timeless American design still speaks to you. These 20 cars were not chosen for speed, trophies, or shock value. They were chosen for balance, restraint, and the quiet confidence that defines Chip Foose's legacy. If you appreciate this kind of craftsmanship and storytelling, please like the video and subscribe to American Muscle Soul. Your support helps us continue exploring the cars that shape design, memory, and the soul of American automotive culture. See you on the next road trip.